think it's all just books.
Okay,
I don't think it's anything extra in that,
okay.
if I remember from past discussions over the years.
Because I thought it was an umbrella
Nothing
that
looked,
covered other educational material.
I don't think so, I may be wrong about that, but I always thought textbooks was that, and then they had the other educational material back over in that, something supplies part. And Jessie may know, she may remember from her school board years whether or not that's the case.
I'm surprised because they were cutting down.
Well, I kind of wondered about that myself because but
I did want to stream this so folks who are interested could watch, and go through that, so we're going to get started. Whenever you're ready.
If you guys just make sure your mic's up before streaming.
Yep.
We're on. Yeah, we're good.
Is that me?
Oh, okay. We're live. Okay, we're streaming. Hello, everybody. This is our work session to talk about budget. What I'd like to do is do a little round robin to see what general questions everybody has. Then maybe we can theme some things around subject material. David provided us with a vehicle equipment and replacement list, and that's going to take a little while to go through and have some discussion about. We do have some discussion about NRVCS, and Forrest, I'll ask you to share kind of what you shared in your email, but I am going to propose that after we have that discussion, we come back together maybe in the summer to have an intentional discussion about all of our social services, community services, outreach, pieces like that, because that's going to be a big work session, big talk for next year for big changes. Anyway, what do you have budget-wise that you wanted to tick on?
So I don't have any enormous questions right now. I did just spend a while talking with David about the timing of when we could expect our reserves to come back up. So if that's something that other people are curious about, I know he has a really good answer to help us all understand when our reserves are going to be back up to a level where we're comfortable. We chatted before the meeting.
Forrest, what do you have?
Yeah, you mentioned the NRVCS stuff. Do you want me to go ahead and get into that some
Yeah,
now?
let's
or?
come back to it,
Okay,
yeah.
Other than that, just a clarification from David. I noticed there's a 200,000 to 300,000 increase in general in the rec funds, and I know we've talked about as a council. That's something we want to focus on some more. Just wanted to check on what that is. I know there's the tennis court improvements, the HVAC at the recreation center, Hodge Park improvements, and the cardio equipment at the rec center. Is there anything else in that amount?
those pretty much
That's
are
it.
Those are
Okay.
the biggest items that are in there, and that's that extra, that HVAC improvement is the big.
Yeah.
HVAC improvement is the biggest expense.
Okay,
in
cool.
all of that.
Yeah.
And the tennis court thing is about $80,000 of that as well. And that's
Okay.
converting the existing tennis courts in Bissett Park to half being tennis courts and half being pickleball.
Yep.
Because pickleball has got such a
Pickleball.
life to it.
Wildly popular.
Yeah.
That's great, though.
I got to California, and that's what they were playing
Yep.
in California. Pickleball.
Jesse, what do you have?
I'm good. I've been asking as we've been going.
Okay.
Dick, do you have anything?
The only thing the only thing I had was I got into the school budget, and what jumped out at me was the textbook increases. We went actually from the approved 2021 in one category
School.
was 133,000. It's now up to 302,000. The other one was at 113,432. It's now up to 257,000. Those are really big increases. I just wondered, I don't have a problem with their budget, but I was wondering about that item because it
Let's
just.
send Rob an email and get him to respond back to us on that textbook fund.
Yeah.
I'll be glad to do that, send it tonight or in the morning.
Okay, because it just seems like it's a little out of whack with
Well,
other things.
is this something that's going to continue to grow? Is this a one-time cost? You know, all of those kinds of things to understand. Because
I'd like to understand
right
it
now,
more.
things are a little bit zany, and some costs may be one-time things that we hit
Yeah.
right now, and, you know.
We need to know that, though, so
the
we can plan.
Sustainability is really
But
key.
we're going to be going
Let me
into
forget
deeper
that. Did you-
detail on Monday on
Monday.
this budget.
But I
Yeah.
do think anything you have for the schools, it probably behooves us to go on and get those questions in through an
You can
email.
get them to me.
That's what I
I'll-
thought.
David, let him go through an email that way.
We can have those answers ahead of time.
We-
Because Monday, we're not going to have, 2 or 3 hours to talk stuff like this.
And we don't need gotchas on Monday,
No,
you know
well,
what I mean?
I don't think we'll get an answer. I think, it's something we got to do ahead of time so that we make sure we know what we're talking about and that
Yeah.
if there is a question, if it needs to be researched, it can be researched and we can figure out from there. Okey-doke.
Looking at the rest of our budget, I understand why David keeps winning awards for his budgets, because he certainly does a good budget.
Absolutely. Now, I don't have a whole lot. I do think the discussion with social services, like I said, NRVCS, social services, all of those elements is probably a pretty big discussion to have. And as we wrap up COVID, or hopefully, knock on wood, we get toward the end of the pandemic side and into a new normal, we can begin to look at that and then look at what we're doing intentionally, maybe chart a course for a 5 or 10 year plan, and go from there. And same thing, that was the whole reason to talk about equipment replacement and all that tonight, and what the long-term view of that is. We have several pieces we're looking at this year, and I think understanding what we're replacing, the age of our equipment infrastructure, what we may need to replace in the coming years is helpful to look at as we go through that. And then I do think talking about the reserves, I think folks need to understand too where those reserves come from, that it's just like when you get a paycheck, you set aside a certain percentage of your money, you're going to save this, you're going to do that. In the last couple years, we've been very fortunate that we had decent reserves to help us through some of the difficult periods, but that's a challenge. So why don't we just start with that, because that helps us set the stage for where we're going. So do you want to talk a little bit about the reserves and where we think we'll be, and then when we think
email
we're going to
that sheet to
get
you.
between $3 and $6 million at some point?
Yeah, so I didn't bring my detail about the reserves with me, but just generally speaking, as you know, each fund, we try to hit a target goal, and that target goal is what's kind of established by the industry. If you have an emergency, if you have a project that you haven't expected that you would need, like in the case of the electric department, maybe a substation would get struck by lightning or something like that, and it doesn't end up being covered by insurance, or you have some special project that you want to do. That's what generally comes out of your reserves. It also, while I haven't dwelled on it, it is also one of the important aspects that when you go to borrow money or you go to do anything financially, they're looking at that pool. That's why they always, you remember our financial advisor when he came, they were looking at where we were, and we were in good shape on those reserves. A lot of times they're relying on what we've done with those enterprise funds. So the enterprise funds being sanitation, electric fund, and water, wastewater, all are well exceed the reserve amount. So we're in good shape. We've been building those back now really since our economic, kind of our restructure of our economy back in 2014, 2015. So it's taken a while, but we've gotten to where we want to be and build that. General fund reserves are always going to be up and down because they're impacted by schools, they're impacted by public safety, they're impacted by any kind of special project or whims of the economy, those kinds, I shouldn't say whims because it's not whims, but anything that may happen in the economy. And right now it's been very unpredictable because it's being impacted by a war, it's being impacted by inflation, it's being impacted by the ability to have supplies get to you when they are. So our general fund, while we were almost at that $3 million mark, which is what our target goal is for general fund reserves, it has been dropping because we've been supporting other projects and we've been supporting other things, and then also the impact that we've had throughout the pandemic. So the thought has been, we're kind of where we're still getting some reserves coming in, but we've used those. So while we're low right now, the thought is that we will take we're able to do a one-time revenue replacement. So any revenue under $10 million from ARPA, communities under 30,000, you can take that one-time exemption, and we would logically do that. It'd probably be a resolution that we'll do this summer once we get the other half of the money that comes in. And then you're able to take about $2 million. I think that's the number we've been talking about. The auditors and all would take $2 million, a little over that, put it back into your general fund, and with what you've saved up, you're gonna be right back at $3 million. So all of our reserves across the board are good, so that if you have an emergency or if you need to go borrow money for something down the road, we're back there where we need to be, or if you wanna put into any other projects going down into the future. So that's kinda the philosophy behind the reserves. They're about 20%, and the way reserves are structured for your enterprise funds is it's about 20% of your cost of business. So you go in and you figure out what your expenses are, you take 20% of that, and that gets you your reserve number. And that's if the banks close today, if there's a catastrophe today, we can keep the government going for 6 months, I think it is the number that we look at, 4 to 6 month time period to be able to keep. Now, that's with lots of cuts, but that's to keep basic. No. Yeah, no, because we've, with a $60 million budget, obviously we couldn't, figure $30 million. But once you've gotten down to the very bare basics, making sure water's on, electric on, garbage is being run, and that we've got basic things covered with the public safety folks. There may be a lot of dark offices around, but you're at that point where you're able to at least make it through a good number of months till things change or you figure out some kind of other plan, that kind of thing. So that's why those reserve numbers are set where they are. They're different for every community. Our number has been the one that works best for us and has generally been recommended by our auditors, and that's been the goal for us. So you will recall, maybe when you first came into office, we were down a number of those. So we've worked pretty hard. So over the last 4 years, we've been able to bring up all of the reserves in the utility accounts and, still been able to keep at least the base going, that we're not losing money. You're not seeing red lines in general fund or anything. We've been able to try to keep things, where they need to be. And hopefully, if everything's turned the corner and the $30 million worth of building permits we've had out for the last year and a half are all coming online, we're going to see some growth in our economy and hopefully see some improvements. And that's bearing that all things stay equal and we don't have any issues with long-term inflationary periods.
Well, I think the hard thing is kind of what you talked about. We
Had made reserves a priority, but also you can't, it's just like in your family life, you can't ignore things that need to be repaired, enhanced, improved for too long and save that money, because ultimately you're just going to turn right around and spend it. So it's a balance of where you go with things, and I think we found that decent medium. I would prefer that we were actually a little bit higher too, because I know some of the headwinds we potentially have as our economy is changing a little bit in Radford, as our citizenry is changing a little bit. But having said that, I think we're on a path. We got really lucky, honestly. We got very lucky with this federal money. And that has helped us get where we need to be. Because I was losing a lot of sleep over it before we got the numbers that we were going to get.
And that is, I neglected to say, the all-important word is unrestricted.
Right.
That's money that's unencumbered.
And there's other money we could get
Yeah,
to
because
if we
you've got
needed to.
another 3 or
Right.
4 million. You can always
Right.
unencumber that money. It's not recommended, but if you got in a spot and we had a big emergency, you can undesignate that money. There's a process you go through. We just haven't needed to do that up to now.
Right, and again, you brought up some very good points. Not that we're going to necessarily look to borrow a lot of money in the next 4 or 5 years, but that's important to have. And one of the reasons the way we structured the taxes the way we did was so we'd build that ahead of time rather than wait, which helps us on rates and everything else. So I think that's a positive. It's a real balance, because you could try to save more and this budget could be smaller. And we not replace equipment and not do things, but then you're going to have other problems that pop up that you're going to maybe spend more on. So it's walking that fine line. And, to what we're going to talk about within our VCS, we could potentially take more money out of reserves to pump into that, but that brings its own set of challenges as we go there. So, it's been, again, I'm very, very thankful that we received the federal money and we were allowed to do the transfer that we are, because that's helping us get where we need to be. And that was part of the reason that money exists the way that it does, because the economy has been so strange for communities for the last 2 years. And I think that's been a positive. But does anybody else have any questions? I mean, the bottom line is we're in pretty good shape right now. It's not necessarily ultimately where we want to go, but with the right spending and investing, maybe we get where we want to be.
Oh, there's communities out there that are, just don't have any reserves. I mean,
Right.
They're down to nothing, so I
Well, they
I
spend
feel-
all
I
their
feel
money
good
as soon
that
as they
we-
get it,
We
yeah.
are where we are, because we've been working hard to keep reserves
Absolutely.
in place. We do have money for emergencies and those kinds of things, so we're there.
Just two things. I remember when we had our financial analyst go over it with us when we were looking at our borrowing power, what it was, and it was so important to have those reserves to a certain point. Otherwise, if you wanted to borrow, you could borrow, but at a higher interest rate, which makes it almost unaffordable on some things. The other thing was, years ago, we had some councils, and you'll remember these probably, that as far as equipment replacement, they would kick it down the road. That's a real false savings, and it's an expensive one, because in the end, you have to pay the piper. You can't extend the life of these when you extend the replacement schedule. The life of the vehicle is the life of the vehicle. So we were extending some of those, kicking them down the road, but then the maintenance costs went through the roof for those things. This meant sometimes that your employees were not fully functional at a time when they needed the equipment. All kinds of unintended consequences from kicking things down the road. I'm glad in recent years that we've stuck to our replacement schedules and bit the bullet when we needed to and went ahead and did that.
Yeah, I will say, well, do you want to get, well, I'll wait till you get,
We're gonna get
yeah,
into the whole.
finish reserves.
I have some specific ways I want to do that, and then we'll go from there. But anything else, Dick? You good? Everybody else good? Okay.
Something that we'll add to our reserves, as you know, we're getting ready to hit our 10-year mark. We're kind of at that plateau for the Bell Heath payment.
Yeah.
And as that starts declining, more is going to principal, less is going to interest. It's hard to believe we're already through 10 years and we're going through the next 10 years. When you first start these, you think, gosh, 20 years is forever. So we will start dropping off, and in the next 3 years, we're pretty much way off, so that you're seeing that positive aspect of it coming back, so that you're able to put some more money back into reserves. That's your biggest debt service in the general fund, is those two. Your next debt service is the hydro, which is over in the electric fund.
And it's pretty much self-sustaining.
Yeah, and it's self-sustaining, correct.
The biggest thing I worry about with the Bell Heath money and
And this building,
Yeah.
I knew there was one more.
looking at Bell Heath too much,
Right, that's three.
there are needs outside of what we funded already with the schools. It's going to be a little while before we can get major projects going, unless more money is found, matching money from the state, something like that. But I don't disagree that maybe some of that can go toward reserves, but I suspect that the needs are going to probably equal a lot of our savings, if we're fortunate. And so we're the good news is we have a plan in place. It's like, you're going to need to buy another car, and the payment on one car is going to end when you need to buy another car. It doesn't mean you're just going to have an extra X $1,000 a year. So, but that's a discussion to have, and all of those things are things to look at. I do think it's worth it, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk equipment is to understand what we're replacing this year, what we're not replacing this year, and where we are with some things. And I know this is a big part of what you do when you go through the budget, is say, what can we get another year out of this? Can we get another 2 years out of that? And to factor in some of the things where we do have to wait, because we can't replace everything right away. So I would like to talk about that. I'd like to talk about the biggest ticket replacement items first. And I think that's our trucks, right? Our sanitation and all that.
Yes, and just a couple of comments. When you look at the vehicle replacement list, the list is what is typically the life expectancy by either warranty or by the
Right.
company. We take really good care of our equipment. They keep oil changes, things like that. So a truck that would normally, if you see something on here and say, well, gosh, it looks like it should have been replaced, it's because it's in such good condition. It's low miles, no rust. There's some vehicles that only come out of the shop, if it's snowing, or we keep moving around trying to keep up with what's going. So everything over the last couple of years, the shortfall has been really in police cars. And that's been the biggest thing. We looked at, those of you who are on council 4 years ago, remember we talked about possibly going to a lease program. And Calista and I met with Enterprise and another company just to see, there were so many strings attached.
It didn't make
I shouldn't
sense.
say strings, but there were complications and the cost. We decided not to go that route. For us, it was better to keep paying cash. I'm not going to say that long-term may not be better. But police cars, public safety vehicles as a whole get a very hard use because they've got multiple people in them possibly every evening. They go through different kinds of, cleanup stages. And, of course, COVID, we were trying to clean them up more often, all the things that were associated with that. So what we've done is gone through, and everything in the equipment list has been things that I meet with each department, and we go through what is it that you really need, making sure we're not putting something off. Probably one of the few things that we've been putting off and Band-Aiding has been the street sweeper, and that's in there this
Yes.
year. That street sweeper is a 2006 model, I think it is, and it's probably one of the hardest used, and while
And we're still going to keep the old one too, right?
yeah, we'll use it
So-
as long as
right.
it's getting brushes put on it
Yep.
now, and something else is being fixed in the exhaust, and then it's gonna be out on the streets, and it'll pick up all these rocks and clean everything up well.
No,
We
that's
also
good.
use it for construction sites. The new piece of equipment that we've got, as with everything, it's been, about the same time, 4 years ago, y'all recall, we were talking about sanitation trucks, and we ended up leasing sanitation trucks because the cost of those was the heavier frames, the emissions, all the things that went into the design of the trucks, cost of metal was going up. And all of a sudden, we went from what used to be, $150,000 sanitation truck, 130, 150, to us now 230. They just all of a sudden jumped up in price. So those expenses, we look at those each time, making sure we're getting the right size vehicle, making sure it meets our replacement schedule. Sanitation trucks are the most used and the most needed for replacement. Generally, you need a truck about every 2 years. And we're staying on that every 2-year replacement. That's why there's one, I hesitated in skipping this year, but it looks like we're going to be okay to keep the truck in there. We're going to pay cash for it. I think I mentioned during budget, if we get further into the fiscal year and find out we're not going to end sanitation where we thought we would, we'll just go ahead and do a lease purchase. It's not a whole lot to do that, so that we're not putting out all that money on the front end. But I think right now we're just going to pay on the front end, get the sanitation truck. That takes care of sanitation. Over in the electric fund, their update on every time we keep the most modern bucket trucks and things like that, because they're the most safety driven for the safety of our personnel, and then also they're changing the way they're made and things like that. So we've kept that up to date. You usually see a digger derrick or utility truck on the list about every 2 to 3 years. You didn't see one this year. It was the Uniloader, which is a little digger that helps put in their electric lines, and it was what was the other thing? It had 2 things in there. Shoot, it's escaped me. Anyway, whatever the other item was, are the 2 things that they needed. I've got bucket truck on my mind. That's not it.
We show mileage on these, but like on the police vehicles, the idling times, the motor engines have a lot more time on them than the mileage on the indicator shows.
Yeah, we went through.
They sit off with, they have equipment, they have to keep the engines running, so, and they have to keep heat or air conditioning going. So they run, and that's not putting any miles on it.
Well, one of the
They're
things.
putting a lot of miles on the engine.
Well, one of the things we've talked about, and then also before I leave the utility accounts, the enterprise funds, then over in the water fund is generally the large things like a Vector, and we bought a new Vector 3 or 4 years ago. That's going to have a 10 or 15-year life. I take great care of it. It's the biggest, most important piece of equipment we've got. And then pickups is the other thing, and then you'll see a sprinkling of those from year to year. We bought some of the last 2 years, so we didn't need any for this year. When it comes to police vehicles, emergency, emergency, particularly in the fire department, those are on a schedule. So like medic truck, which you just approved at the last council meeting, we've got a fire truck. When you see your restricted reserves, there's $671,000 roughly in that. It takes $700,000 to buy a new truck. We get money added to that from both the city and the state, so we'll hit that mark. So that will go towards buying a new scheduled truck next year, which will be, we always have to plan out now more so than ever. You got to order Now they expect a delivery in a year and a half because you don't get trucks anymore in 6 months. So that goes into play. Then back to the police car thing. What we've been talking about across all departments is diversification of the department. So don't buy all Chevrolets, don't buy all international trucks, don't buy all, because we went through a spell where we had bought a number of Chryslers, I think Dodges, that engines were blowing, and it was recognized by Dodge, but it wasn't something that was picked back up. I think we had one that was under warranty, and then the others we've had to the cars have been 30,000-mile cars. They had a long life still left in them, but we went ahead and had to spend $5,000 or $6,000. That's why that internal services fund bumped up, because we were spending money on putting in new engines, but we knew the body of the car could make it through another 4 or 5 years. So anyway, those are the vehicles that get the most wear, that get the most change. So we've been trying to diversify. So now we're using Explorers, isn't it right? I turned my head. We're going to Explorers. There are other vehicles that are coming out, but there's not a whole lot of police vehicles out there like there used to be. So we're always looking to see, so that you don't end up, if there's one problem with one few years model's engine or exhaust or some other kind of problem, axles, things like that, we're making sure that one, that doesn't cost us in the shop, two, that the vehicle's up and serviced and regular to perform the needs that it has, and then also making sure that we've got the best equipment that we possibly have, one, that it's safe, and two, that it's able to go to a scene and not be one that's towed from a scene when it ends up. So by the vehicles that you got with COVID funding and the vehicles we've got in the upcoming budget, we're caught up, we're in good shape. We'd like to, we're still getting there. We're still a few away, but over the next couple of years, we should be at the point where those public safety vehicles, at least over on the police side, the chief is.
Do they come
shaking his
equipped
head.
with cameras? Do they come equipped with
Fully
cameras?
equipped, everything is in the budget's fully equipped. It's got the cages, the lights, and that's what, we got 2 vehicles that just got sent to be updated because they were still waiting for cages and lights and some other
Cameras?
things. But those are the 2 that we bought a little while back. So cameras, all that kind of stuff, that he
Good.
fully outfits them.
Yeah, the cost in the budget includes upfitting cameras, everything.
Great.
So, question about that, are we able to
Fund any of our equipment and vehicle purchases with our one-time money, with our ARPA funds and some other things along
It
that
was
line?
included in CARES, and
Right.
it does include ambulances, but it does not appear to include public safety vehicles. However, I got an update just Friday. and
Okay.
I saw where it looked like they were providing some public safety vehicles. So I need to look into that and see if there's a possibility that any percentage of the money you've got in the budget could be moved over. And that way, what we would do if that would occur is then we would just move the access to probably
reserves.
contingency. And that way, if something
Okay.
came up like nearby community services or something else, you've got, because right now there's no contingency. There's a little bit in manager's budget, like $5,000. But we don't have a big contingency fund anywhere.
Well, in worst case scenario, we can put it in reserves as unrestricted and use as needed. That, I was kind of wondering about that, if we could do it. And like our sweeper, for example, I didn't know if that would qualify under ARPA because of what it does to help make outside activities
tried to-
functional.
Yeah, I tried to look at as many. I know y'all want to, 2 things go into play when you're looking at that. One, this is once in a lifetime, so you want to make sure
Right.
it's something that not in 10 years, it's not,
Right.
put out to pasture, or it's sold for auction, or, it's a depleted resource. So when you're doing that, I'm always kind of thinking about things on the ground.
Sure.
Parks and buildings and playgrounds and things like that can last a long, long, long time, and versus something like a piece of equipment that could fizzle out. But CARES money allowed you to do more of that because you were doing more COVID mitigation
Right.
in that money, and that there was more cleaning involved in the ambulances, so we were able to get an ambulance. There was more cleaning of police cars and things like that, so we were able to get, 4 cars in the COVID money last year, and that was in the CARES Act.
Well, and that was what I wanted to ask. Did we get all 4 cars? Have they all arrived? Okay.
Yep.
Are they all outfitted now? Are they all back and outfitted and?
So the 4 that we got from CARES have been on the street for 8 months. The 2 that we got this year's current budget,
Okay.
they're actually 90% done at the outfitter right now.
And the new ones, we're getting 5 new ones, aren't we?
So,
So we'll do what?
Getting 5 new ones, let's see, how many are
This
in?
budget, there's 2 police cars, 3 detective cars, and 1 admin car.
Yeah,
Right?
okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
And chipper was the thing, Calista said chipper, that's in the electric department.
Yeah.
So the chipper is the other piece of equipment
Yeah.
that we needed. And that's
Yeah.
important, that we had two things with that, a lot of branches, things like that for both the public works side as well as the electric department. When they're having to cut branches, they're able to chip that material and we're able to use it for recycling.
Well, and I don't disagree with doing bigger investments with the ARPA money. I think that makes sense rather than, just spending it on everyday needs. But I do see things, a piece of equipment that might last us 15 to 20 years, that's a pretty decent investment if we're able to do that. And that does give us, even though it's, 20, 30, 40,000, whatever that dollar amount happens to be, that gives us just that little bit of extra flexibility towards some of these other things that we can't do with the ARPA money as it stands, to say, well, we can just spend that on, an emerging need. I mean, I hate to say it, but, DSS, if we have a couple rough family situations, that can easily be a ton of money, and we just don't have a whole lot of flex in there, and, other things along that line. So I was curious about that, and so it sounds like there may be a possibility, if we chose to, not that we're going to, but if we chose to shift a couple of things to ARPA money, if we wanted to, which would then give us a little more flexibility within the budget should we need to.
Yeah, and just know that's ongoing, so if that, I don't think I'll know the answer before we have to make our budget
Okay.
public hearing Monday night, but if that does appear that that's the wave, and that's, when they're doing the final, what is it called, final, we got another 1,000-page document today, so whatever it's called now, if we find out that it, I hate to see, anyway, hate to seem like whatever, but I'm tired, and it's an ongoing thing, because it seems like every couple of weeks we get a 1,000-page document that's got something new. So the most updated compliance, if it does end up showing that we can use public safety vehicles, and that includes police cars in it, what we will do is not use this money. We will come back with an appropriation to get the 2 cars or 3 cars or whatever. The main thing that we need to do right now, because there is a lead time, is once the budget's approved, is just to go ahead and at least place the order. May not be any appropriation or anything associated with it, just get an order in for Radford so that we got cars coming in. What's your turnaround time now? Are you down to 6 months?
So the good thing about these cars is, the ones that are in the budget sheet, he's got the 2 patrol vehicles on the lot, for us now, if we approve it.
Okay.
The detective vehicles, they'll actually have those pretty quick too.
Okay. And what we do, so our normal, of course, we follow procurement. We go to state contract first and see what's on there, but we do have opportunities where we try to give our local folks, we just bought 2 pickup trucks for Public Works that were in the budget last year. It turns out, local dealership was able to match that for us, and we got a green and a blue pickup truck, that's got Hardy Chevrolet name on it.
Good.
So we try to buy those locally if we can.
What's the average lifespan of a patrol car? If there is an average.
We're getting 8 years, 7 to 8 years, I think is.
I was wondering, when you said 15, 20 years, I was wondering if it was going to be that high, if it was going to be that length of an investment.
Well,
Yeah, not gonna be 15 or 20 years for a police car.
Might still be a good purpose for it, but.
but there's more than patrol cars in that budget too, so.
Yeah.
So your
Fair
marked
point.
patrol cars is gonna be about 7 years, typically, and then something admin or detective, I would say about 10 or 11.
So, might get there, but.
I mean, yeah, I think we could probably stretch it, because then they're not completely used up. I mean, especially an admin vehicle, it's, got some miles on it, but could be used as a city vehicle should we need, transfer over.
And when you
so.
look at your list, the vehicle that's in there, you may look and say, oh gosh, I wonder why that is over that. It's because it's been everywhere else. So once it has its life in the police
I
department.
got a picture of it.
Yeah, especially with the SUVs, once it's done in the police department, if it's still got some life in it, we may move it to the shop, or pickup trucks especially, they may end up, in the end, the rec department always gets the ones at the very, there,
Right.
when it's all done everywhere else, it gets to the rec department.
So
Because
it's
they also
still
need
very
different things, they
worthwhile.
have different kind of life. But we move them down here for admin cars. We generally just make do with what we can. If we travel, our folks just take their own car most of the time. But the vehicle may start out somewhere else, and then as it works its way down, my vehicle now is one that came from the electric department.
Right. Well, and the other thing too, talking about that, what types of vehicles we have for different purposes. SUVs certainly give you certain benefits, but they also are a little challenging with
Hustlers.
fuel economy and and other things like that. And just talking through that a little bit. I mean, we're still going, all our patrol cars are still sedans, right? We're not using any SUVs with the patrol cars, or is that inaccurate?
No, we're using this year.
Are we?
Everything's gone to SUV.
It's all SUV now?
Yeah, because the main supplier was Ford, and they've gotten away from the cars, and the Impala, I guess, is not really considered a one you haul people around. It's not as much a local car, so to
Yeah,
speak.
so actually, and Chevy doesn't even make a police-rated vehicle anymore. And the
Police rated,
problem-
that's what it's.
Yeah, the problem that you run into with equipment officers with non-police rated vehicles is liability.
Right.
You're putting in a vehicle that's used for, families and things like that, and the things that police officers are doing, that's some issues. As far as the SUV question, the SUVs are actually more fuel efficient than the Dodge Chargers we have on the street.
Okay.
Dodge Charger has a V8 Hemi engine, and the new Explorers have a V6.
Okay.
Fuel is a consideration in all our
Well,
purchases.
it's got to be. I mean, and, one of the things, not that we would look at it for like a patrol car or something like that, at some point, I think we're going to have to look at, do we keep going with just fossil fuel vehicles, or do we look at hybrids, or do we look at electric vehicles? With some of our other equipment, do we look at things that could be natural gas powered and things along that line? But that's a much bigger, deeper discussion, and I get that. But, I think that's something we got to talk about at some point, especially as fuel efficiencies change. How does that impact us when a fleet is required to be at a certain fuel efficiency, like if the federal government's fuel efficiency standards down the road? I mean, that's not going to impact us in
They
terms of,
grandfather what you have, so we would start then buying the new vehicle. We've been looking at electric charging stations as we're going in the next
Right.
generation of things, where those could be, as the vehicles get better and they're able to meet probably a vehicle that's in public service is probably one of the roughest lives a vehicle could have, because it's used for everything. From
Right.
animal control and hauling animals all the way through to, being out in the field, out in the mud, and all for, dealing with an emergency. They're dealing with wind and things blowing into them and things like that. So we have to look at the serviceability of the vehicle, and then we're also looking at, what the life expectancy of that vehicle is. Does it meet our demands? And also making sure that it, not getting the most expensive thing on the block. I mean, it's rare. I think we got a garbage truck one time that had chrome bumpers on it, because we went and bought it from actually, it was that first one that we got. It was actually at a trade show, and it had chrome horns on it and bumpers, and everybody wanted to drive that one because it looked so good for a while. And that one's actually still in the fleet, but it's a really good vehicle. So we're always looking to see if there's a show vehicle out there that maybe has 2,000 or 3,000 miles. It's been to exhibits. It's available now, and you can get, save 20-30% on it. And Jeff's going to be looking to see if, Harvey Chevrolet has 3 of the detective cars that we need that may fit his needs. It would beat the state contract prices. We're just trying to do everything we can. They don't carry really a police vehicle, but they may be able to provide that admin vehicle, and they may be able to provide those vehicles for us for the Detectives Bureau.
for the admin vehicles, we don't have to go with the same level that we do for a patrol car? Is that accurate?
Yeah, we can go with something.
Okay.
Let me ask, I know our aerial truck is 5 years old now, the ladder truck. And I know that the university in the past has always paid part of that, because the only reason we have to have one that big is because of one big building. And
Actually, that truck is 8 years old now.
it's 8 years old now. I thought it was 2017, but,
That's the Quint. That's the other
okay,
smaller.
a smaller one. Okay, the other one. But are we anywhere near having to replace that?
No, those have got 15-year lives on them.
15-year life, good.
And we have those 2 vehicles because of the taller buildings at the university, particularly Hughes Hall. And that's the
Hughes
reason
Hall,
the
yeah.
university contributes. We've got debt service on the Quint truck. We just finished paying for the aerial ladder truck year before last. And the Quint, I think, has got 3 more years left on it. So
Yeah.
it's about halfway through its lifespan by the time we get to the end of
Hate
debt
to think what
service,
that would
and then
cost
it's-
now. This last one cost $860,000 for the small one.
Yeah, they're expensive.
They're expensive. I hope they last a long time.
Because a pumper now, the pumper that will be coming to you all, they're working on the specifications for that now, and you've probably heard that. They've got the ambulance specifications about done. We'll be ordering the ambulance in the next couple of weeks. And again, it takes 12 to 18 months, maybe longer to get it. We're hoping it could be sooner. We're looking to see what they may have in service, but we're also looking, we don't get it too quick. We make sure our rotation is good. We've got two good pieces of equipment in the fleet now. But the pumper truck that will be replaced is the old number 3, which is one of the old white ones that's been around for
Yeah.
a while. We don't use it much anymore. They get it out and keep it exercised. It's got good trade-in value. Smaller communities, volunteer communities need those and are glad to get them. So we're going to do that in trade. But a new pumper is approaching $700,000. I mean, it's just the cost of the equipment. So, but we do have, we've been.
So, you know, when we're talking about reserves, I mean, that's a
We've been
perfect
building reserves
example,
for that.
you know?
That's a restricted reserve account, so you
Yeah.
shouldn't have to put any extra in it. We've got enough.
Yeah, we built that up.
But I mean, that's a perfect example.
That's
There's,
fully
you can
equipped.
spend $1 million in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So,
And what happens is, in the case of an ambulance, you've got another $30,000 or $40,000 worth of stretchers, nearly
Right.
$30,000. The heart monitor is $60,000. You know, those pieces of equipment add up pretty quickly. So you add all of that, $6,000, excuse me.
Are we self-insured on those?
Oh, but nothing's, we're insured through Versa, so we're in good shape on all of those kinds of things. But yes, we are where we need to be on the equipment. But the fire truck, I think, is gonna be like $600,000. It's got about another $100,000 in ladders and things like that. You
Yeah.
can use some of the old stuff, but generally you wanna use new stuff that's rated to the new standard.
Yeah.
But everything that's in the budget pretty much follows what we need from this plan. We're watching to make sure, what you don't want to do is get out and then find out you got $2 million worth of bucket trucks to buy in 1 year. You know,
Right.
and a bucket
Yeah,
truck can be very
yeah.
expensive. They're over
Gotta keep 'em on.
$200,000. Same
That's-
thing with fire trucks, police cars, things like that. Like I say, the only time we've kind of stretched out our police cars as long as we can. COVID helped us and hurt us during that time period, but this should help us get caught back up again.
well, I wanted to talk about one thing before we get into police cars, because I do want to talk about that a little bit, but the Vactor. That's been one of the best tools that we ever bought. We only have the one.
Yeah.
What are you thinking in the next few years? Because we're using it more and more and more, and, you know, it's a couple $100,000 to get here, or 180, whatever that total cost was. I kind of think of that like the street sweeper. When it's been down, it's been missed. And as our sewer system and everything is continuing to age and some challenges with that, the Vactor's really helping us. What are you thinking?
I have to say, I had the same question. I spoke with David about this. As you know, I had the city
Yeah.
sewage issue in
Yes.
my basement that I'm still contending with. So my question was, we have the Vector, and I know that because I feel like right now, those folks are so reactionary because we have all of these fires to constantly put out. I even asked David if maybe what we need is, I'm not thinking of the vehicle, but I'm thinking someone to utilize that vehicle with regularity, that they are assigned to do that preemptive maintenance consistently.
And we have done some of that. It's
Oh,
just
and I
not a
think we
lot.
try, and
Yeah.
the reason is because, you know, we have
Yeah.
older,
Plumbing
older
systems.
plumbing systems, and so we are reacting a lot, and these guys, I can tell you from experience, are doing a wonderful job, but they are extremely busy, and so some of the preventative things, what I said to David was, not necessarily the vehicle approach, but do we need someone getting that vehicle out even more to do some preventative measures? And I know you were going to give that some thought, because I know they are, you see them out everywhere. We get emails where there's consistent issues, and would it make more sense to have someone just assigned to that preventative measure consistently?
We have finally gotten back in the last few weeks, have gotten back to nearly a full crew over in the sanitation, not sanitation, but in the sanitary sewer area. Don's plan is to have he has a regular crew that's very interested in the truck and one that's very expert at it. And that's the crew. He's going to have them be doing a lot of that work unless something major comes up. And then the other half of his crew will be doing water lines. They'll go around and he's got about 30 locations that as we get into the winter months, we know grease backs up and he washes those out. So we do have preventive maintenance areas that are now back on the list since we've got more folks to be able to do that. And And then the other thing is, the neat thing about the Vector that we have, we bought it from a company in Richmond, they're known for their manufacturing. If something happens, that piece of equipment is so good, it goes through a rebuild process every once in a while. And we've just had some things, just upgrading, seals and rings and things like that. So it has a long life to it. They take really good care of it, keep it inside, and then they keep it maintained. It's got a lot of stainless steel on it, as you've seen, which is better than the truck we had. But the other thing is that if something happens, it has to go to Richmond. They send a loaner truck out, so we can
Okay.
borrow from them.
Well, that's helpful to know, because that's my concern. We use that thing so much, and it actually has caused us to have fewer problems in a lot of traditionally problem places. But, okay, so with that, I guess my question would be, so we can do the loaner and all
If we had a
that.
second truck, we wouldn't have enough people to run a second truck.
No, I get that, and,
Are we okay staffing-wise to make sure that we're utilizing
Yep.
that truck to its full potential for prevention? Because prevention obviously is so much more cost-effective.
Yeah,
than-
winter months, we're not installing a lot of water lines. They're going to do a lot more of the sanitary sewer prevention type things, vice versa. And then, of course, anytime we've got, like Thursday, we know we've got a lot of rain possibly coming. We're going to the problem areas that have backed up over the years, making sure that the lines are good and clear. The grease and things build up in the lines generally around the holidays, so usually within a couple of weeks after, that's when you're going in and checking all that kind of thing. But the Vector truck that we've got now is considered very young, because we just bought it a few years ago, and we finished the debt service on that's done. And yeah, we just finished debt service on that one, so it's got a long life to it. And like I said,
are there
everybody-
components we should buy that we could have sort of available? Because I know it's got, all those vacuum sections and all those pieces like that. Are there things that we could buy to sort of have that on the shelf should it need anything?
We generally keep the maintenance budget's all going regularly. So any equipment upgrades or anything it needs, they try to keep that kind of stuff on the shelf. The company that knows that we have it, they know you're gonna have it for a long time, so they keep parts in stock for us.
Okay.
So if something happens and they have to come here, a lot of things can be fixed by our shop, but if the company has to come here for a repair, or it has to go to Roanoke to the big equipment place, they always have
The loaner.
It would be a rare thing, I've jinxed it, but it would be a rare thing.
I know, really.
Piece of equipment.
I hate to even talk about it, but I mean, that has been a transformative piece. For those that haven't been around here a really long time, there was a period of time, particularly in Forest Park and in other places, where we had tons of sewer backups and water backups on a regular basis, and just a whole lot of things like that. And this has really helped to prevent some of that.
But I will add to that, I don't even think I got into this during the budget presentation, but the new street sweeper is not the modern day version of the Pelican that you see now.
Right.
Pelican's a brand name. When you see the street sweeper out,
Right.
the new thing now is it's a mini Vector truck. It's got
Okay.
a water tank on it, so when it's putting a lot more water down, so it's both washing
Okay.
streets, pulling that back out, and then it's also got detachable hoses, so we're able to clean out storm lines. Big pet peeve of mine is anytime you see a weed growing out of
Yeah.
a storm drain, this will now take care of pulling
Okay.
that out of those. And then we can also use it if Public Works, if the
Okay.
sewer department has an issue, Public Works can come help them. If we got two homes stopped up at the same time or some
Yeah.
issue, we're able to.
So it
do
can
some
actually be a bit of a backup. Well, that's good. I didn't know that. Well, good.
That's if the price holds out. We've got it priced for that. We can definitely get the Pelican for the amount we've got in there. It appears we can get this truck, which would serve kind of dual roles
Yeah.
for us, and that's the hope as long as the order is available, so we'll just have to see. But
Knock on
that is
wood,
the plan
you know.
to get this.
No, that is good.
And it will-
Well,
once
that helps a lot, and that street sweeper has really been missed, in a lot of ways. Well, I will tell you, it's actually a safety thing, where we've got buildup of gravel and other materials on the sides of the road. It's on the bike paths.
Cleans up
There's
after
a whole
Christmas
lot.
parades.
Christmas parades, all that stuff. We had also talked, one of the challenges we have are stretches of sidewalk, pathway and all that when it snows, they get really iced over and can't be cleaned by an individual. We don't have the manpower to go out and shovel it. Do you think you're going to be able to get the brush unit or whatever we've found as a solution?
We've got one for a Bobcat. We're looking at doing more with trying to keep trails. I don't want to promise that, but we're trying to be able to keep the trails cleaner during times when leaves are down, things like that. Sidewalks is a little more challenging because we've got so many miles of sidewalk, it's hard to do all of them.
I get it.
We got the equipment to do it, it's having the manpower.
Okay, okay.
The reality of it is.
So you feel like you've got enough equipment in those areas to tackle
And with
those
the new
couple
street
things?
sweeper, it has one of those attachments
Okay.
for doing the sidewalks and all.
Yeah, and that won't have to be hit or miss because around the drain sewers, for the drainage, you can tell which ones need it because they'll have ashes and silt around them.
Yeah. Okay, can we talk a little bit about the vehicles we're actually replacing that are on this list? And since it's sort of laid out with by number, can we go vehicle by vehicle and talk about that for our police cars and our other big equipment? So what are we looking at that we're getting new equipment to replace?
Jeff, I'll have to count on you for police cars. The street sweeper's obviously replacing.
Yeah, I
the
saw
Pelican.
that.
The chipper is replacing an older chipper that we've got now. That chipper will go over to Public Works because it's still got a little bit of life left in it. So the things that are on our list, what you will ultimately have is most likely in July, if the equipment comes like we hope it will, sometime between July and December, I'll be bringing a surplus list to you so that the oldest piece, so if the electric department has moved a chipper from the electric over to Public Works, and then the Public Works chipper will go out of the system.
Okay.
So we'll put that out.
Are we
as
not
a
going to keep
surplus.
anything for parts to be able to?
Some are, if it depends on whether if you don't get much out of the trade-in or the sale value of it, we will keep it if it's got parts that are integrated into the newer piece that's coming. The problem is that so much of the new stuff now has got microchips
Yeah,
in it,
and you
things
can't
like
just
that.
trade
It's,
out,
you know, it's
yeah.
not just a pull start or something like that on it.
Yeah.
So from the electric side, so it's the chipper, the uniloader. The old uniloader will come out. I don't think it's got a use elsewhere. That one will come to you all for surplus. The chipper will move down to Public Works, and the Public Works chipper will come out. And the over on the Public Works side, the street sweepers, the big items, the street sweeper, the new one will come in. The old Pelican we will hold on to
Yeah.
because, as you know, we've got the old brush truck. And what we do, we don't spend any money on those. So while it doesn't appear they have any great value, we will keep two, most of the time,
Yeah.
we keep backup garbage trucks,
Yep.
backup the lightning loader, you know, that's the grabber
Yep.
that we use. That is, again, one of the most used. It's out
Absolutely.
multiple times. We've got two trucks, and we sometimes run two drivers, because during the month of April, we're getting so many calls. We'll run both trucks during that period of time, but if anything happens to that oldest truck, it'll just be surplus. We may keep it for parts, or it may come out. If it's a repair, easy repair, inexpensive repair, we'll keep it going. Same kind.
I smile because when you make a sweep in the city, that's why they're keeping it, that junk car for parts.
Yeah, so, and we don't like for the old landfill to load up with a bunch of old parts and things. We only keep them if they're working. But a lot of times what is happening with your oldest vehicle is sometimes it's a gas hog for one thing, and two, it's eating up money in your shop. So if either one of those
I get
meets that
that.
threshold, and our shop is great to come in. We had, oh gosh, what was it? We had a SUV that, it looked good, but everything on it was wore out, and it was gonna cost more to fix it than the car was ever gonna be worth it. So that was one of those cases where we'll use the parts off of it, because we've got a number of Explorers
Right.
left in the, and.
Right, well, that's kind of what I was getting
And
to,
then sell the
because,
whole, ultimately
Yeah.
surplus and be sold over to the junkyard.
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I was getting to too, right now, because it's hard to get certain pieces of equipment, certain parts to replace stuff, and, you know, if we've got it, I think it's, you know, worth it if we can do that.
And over in the general fund, we've got one pickup this year. We're in pretty good shape on cars. We hold our breath and think they're gonna be okay. The cars have gotten expensive, but we don't buy a whole lot of admin type vehicles. But over in general fund, the, what have I got? There's a pickup truck in billing and service. And the reason that's a new one, that is one that comes down from the electric department, different places. But with the new generation of meter reading equipment, it's got to go in a truck that you could put it in there and leave it in there permanently. So this truck is pretty inexpensive. We got a reasonably priced truck that it drives around and picks up all the meter reads. So that's why that is.
Does
in
it make
there.
sense for it to be a truck other than, you know, like a sedan with a back seat
Yeah,
pulled
'cause they
out or
have to,
something?
they have to carry meters in the back sometimes. They
Okay.
carry shovels, because if a meter is found bad, they'll replace it right on the spot. So it does need to carry equipment around, that's the reason it's one of those. And then that truck will, it's got some life left in it, it will go up to the rec department and replace that old white and blue one that
Okay.
got stolen here at one
Yeah.
point. And, you know, we'll move that oldest piece of equipment out, so that's where that will go. And then everything else in general fund is related to Jeff's stuff.
Okay.
I'll
One
let him-
question about,
yeah.
the school board seems to have a lot of vehicles that are pretty old on this list. What's the school?
We don't do anything with theirs. The reason that some of those are still over on our list, if you will remember at one time, we took care of the fleet for schools.
Yeah.
We got away from that a number of years ago. Some of their stuff is still on here, but they handle and manage
They
all the
handle it.
buses, all of their, nothing.
Their own maintenance.
Yeah, we don't do anything at all with, that's a good question. We don't do anything at all with school equipment. That, everything for the schools is now the schools, except when they come to you guys for
In
capital.
1997, you're talking about a lot of maintenance,
Oh, yeah.
you know.
Absolutely. Well, and
And
there's,
actually, some of those, this list probably needs, that stuff probably just needs to be removed from our list if it's on there. I didn't even notice it. We'll pull the school stuff off because we don't have anything, they really don't need to be on our list.
yep. All right, Chief, can you tell us which vehicles we're going to be taking out of service and what we're bringing on?
626 is gonna be the first one.
Okay.
That vehicle has well over 100,000 miles. It's currently dead in our parking lot.
Okay.
Transmission issues, engine, and oil.
That's usually a good sign it needs to come out.
Yeah, I'd say so. So
When the chief says it's dead on the
626.
lot.
And I got pictures here if you want to see those. 667 is a 2009 Crown Victoria. It's got 132,000 miles on it. It was bought used for our department from underneath the town of Ashland. It has had a rough life and is in much needed need of replacement. The trim is falling off. The hood's a different color.
I'd love to see the photos.
Yeah, absolutely. Hood's a different color. It's rusted. It's in pretty bad shape. I
Both
got
of those, we've just mentioned, are both.
I'd rather see the pictures than
They are.
see the numbers.
While Jeff's regrouping, the other thing too, Mayor, go back to your original question. Sometimes y'all will recall over the years, if there has been a use, like, we had an old, let's see, I guess it was an ambulance that came out. The scouts needed it.
Right.
So we ended up, it only had like $1,000 bag or something.
Right.
So I think we ended up donating it, council declared it surplus. It went over to the scouts. I think we had a dump truck that did that. Occasionally we'll get asked, one of the chief's agent, like maybe Cardinal, right, isn't that our academy? Criminal Justice Academy, or somebody like that may ask, may need something if it's still got some lot use left and we can't use it, they may just need it there on campus for some reason. Again, we surplus and we'll turn it over to any of the agencies that are on this list.
We're not buying Crown Victoria then.
No, but I think that's a testament, I think that's a good thing, though, the Fords that we're buying, if they stand up any comparison to the Crown Vics.
Crown Vic was a good car, it
Good
lasted.
car.
Yeah, these are 16 years old, so,
That's a testament to what they
Yeah.
did for us.
Yeah, they really
yeah.
were.
All right, so we got those two. What else are we taking out?
566 is a 2004 Chevrolet Tahoe with 168,000 miles. It's dead as well, bad transmission, and it's not running. Got pictures of that one.
Now, has that one been used as patrol as well?
Nope, that's a detective.
Okay,
And I think that was passed down from the fire department to us.
It's been in a lot of places.
okay.
The next one is 710, which is a 2006 Volkswagen Jetta.
You can write a history on our cars, I mean, they have quite a life, they can talk.
This was actually a asset forfeiture seizure for us. We've made the best use of it that we can. It's a 165,000 miles on it, and it's a diesel, which presents some unique issues for the department as well.
That's a lot of miles.
And what have you been using that for primarily?
That's detective/admin.
Okay,
And this is, Councilman Harshberger had mentioned, sometimes you can't always go on the miles because the police car is idling. from
Oh,
the
yeah.
time it goes into service. So, if you had a lot of our vehicles, police cars don't have those, but a lot of our vehicles do have hour meters on them, so you're able to tell.
yeah.
Like backhoes and things like that.
Well, I'm going to come back to a couple of those things. I just wanted to go down our list first and then go with that. So what's next?
Next one is 623. I don't have pictures of 623, but it is a 2005 Tahoe out of duct tape and super glue it.
Okay.
The next one is a 780. It is another seat vehicle that we made the best use of for our departments. 2010 Dodge Avenger. Broke down about 2 weeks ago in Salem for a new cruise. Had to be towed back to Radford and left them on the side of the road. We got it back. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to fix it.
And is that another detective vehicle, or
It's an admin.
that's been an admin?
Not a great look.
I do want to come back to that in just a minute, but go ahead with what else we're,
Well,
That's
the
everything?
six. That's the
Okay.
six, but I got a couple more that we're just gonna,
you take out of service?
we're not, 707 is actually dead, so we gotta take that out of service.
When you say dead, how dead is dead?
Dead motor, dead transmission.
Okay.
Will not fix it. Dead.
Okay.
Costs more to fix than a vehicle's worth.
DNR at the shop.
And you can get by with taking that out of service?
I don't think we have a choice.
No, I know. I'm just saying, though. Has that primarily been used as a administrative?
707 was patrol.
Okay.
724 is an admin vehicle. We have, with the six that we have, this wasn't planned, this being taken out of service, but it's got 2010 with 120,000 miles on it.
Okay. Do we, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, do we have any current asset forfeiture that you're looking at bringing on the fleet?
No.
Okay.
2007 Ford Explorer, it's marked, got 110,000 miles on it.
Which one is that number? I'm sorry.
I don't have that number. I gotta find
I think I've got it here. Is it, would 678 be right on that?
that sounds about right. It's been,
103,000 miles on it?
yeah, as of today,
100.
110.
110? Okay.
And that's, like I said, it's having some mechanical issues. We use it as a spare currently for patrol, but it's not used every day. for patrol work. 627, did I tell you guys about 627?
Another Crown Vic.
627's got 126,000 miles on it. It's got faded hood, rusted spots on the top. Another hand-me-down from the town of Ashland that we got used. It's had a rough life. It's not dead yet, still going.
Still driving, though. That's,
Not the safest, but it's driving. And the last one we have, tentative again, we're gonna try to put this in a position that it's admin probably and just keep it another year or two if we can. 642 is a 2007 Charger, which is used in admin, 102,000 miles. 679 is a 2010 Ford Escape, 119,000 miles. And 704 is a 2012 Escape with 128,000.
What was that again? What was that?
704.
So these are ones that we're not replacing, but we're removing.
So the plan is to do 3 detective vehicles, one
Mhm.
admin vehicle, which would be the Avenger, and the 2 park patrol.
We feel you will be in good shape if we get that.
This is I think it's definitely a start to put a dent in it, but like, Mr. Rippath mentioned, I think over the course of the next couple of years, if we replace a few next year, a few the year after. The problem we're having is the Dodges, they're just an ongoing issue. A lot of maintenance issues, a lot of concerns with that. Ideally, I'd like to come to you and say, hey, can I replace every Dodge in the fleet? But I don't think that's realistic.
This will be our 11th vehicle replacement in the last year and a half. From the 4 we had to the 2 latest ones that are this week.
that's crazy.
That's all Dodge?
No, I mean, we're talking it through.
Yeah, we're talking some old Fords,
Mhm.
Dodges, I mean, city manager will tell you we've replaced.
How many more Dodges do we have?
agencies. You know,
Is, is there something preventative we can do to those to replace a part or something?
Service manuals and everything, that they're doing the best they can taking care of.
Does it make sense, and I'm just sort of asking in general here, does it make sense to move those from patrol to less strenuous use and then have more patrol vehicles as part of the plan? Or,
I think that's hard to do with the equipment that's in them.
I think you and I talked about that as a possibility. It's a little different.
How many vehicles do we have that are out of service on this list?
Out of service. I think there's only about maybe 10 vehicles in the whole landfill that you're surplus.
That speaks so highly of our maintenance people. There are only 10 vehicles out of this whole list out of service. I think they're unsung heroes.
And this list includes anything over, what's the value? $1,000?
They save us an awful lot of money.
It's got some lawnmowers and stuff on it too, so it's all the way.
Yeah, but they save us an awful lot of money there. They really do a great job.
Yeah, there's some things that, like mowers, usually what happens to them, grass eventually rots out the
Yeah.
mowing deck. The mower's still good, we get a mowing deck. We've been staying, in Public Works, we've been staying decent equipment ahead. So, you remember last, 2 budgets ago, last budget, we bought 2 snow plows and 2 salt machines. So we're 1 ahead. So if the salt machine goes down, we've actually still got a salt machine and a plow that can go on the next truck with it. It snowed this year, so we thought they'd got me going on a truck this year, but that wasn't the case. So everything's been cleaned up, put up, that kind of thing. So, if anything goes down next year, we're good. That's the reason you haven't seen snowplow or salt.
and I'm fine with, well, and of course, the one good news, again, knock on wood, is we haven't had to heavily use the snow plows as much as some seasons, so thank goodness, next year could be totally different, absolutely. These Crown Vics, I mean, they are amazing, you're right, that they've lasted as long as they have, and I think that's fine pulling those out of service because they are another era, and go from there. I think it would be helpful for me. I know you're always going to have some that are on the road, but I think it would be helpful to actually be able to take a look at the fleet at some point with what we have, where, kind of almost what condition, what's in, and all that, so we have a better understanding, because I have no idea what all of our police cars look like and what kind of shape they're in at what point. But I think that would be helpful to me. I know we've done that with some of the fire equipment and looked at that and, gone up and actually taken a look at some of the trucks and things. But do you think we could do that one night?
Sure.
Okay.
I think pictures only speak so many words.
Well, and also, I want to see, so I have a good understanding in my head, what we have, how it's utilized, what we're doing with everything, so we understand when we're doing some of these replacements where we are, and everything that we're getting. I mean, I don't know how you all feel about it, but I don't know that I could say, like, we've got 10 Chargers, and this is the issue, or this is the mix of what we have. But
I love tours.
well, I think the more information we have, the better off we are. And, there are some that are these odd little vehicles that have been through asset forfeiture that have found use with what we've got. And so once we do this, we will take everything that's currently dead on the lot out of service at this point, that it won't be on our list. We're going to go on and get rid of those.
Has no other use, it can't go to another department.
Okay.
That's all.
Is there anything that's,
Mechanically beyond its limits.
so we are working on some that are mechanically struggling right now to try to keep them a little bit longer?
It's that point, pull it off.
Okay. So right now, and I know you've got more Chargers that you need to have replaced eventually and all that, will this get you to where everything you need to have operable is operable? Okay. One piece I'd asked David about, and I know we don't have this programmed in the budget, and you and I have talked about this, is a drone that could be used by PD and could have other uses throughout the city. Let's talk about that just a little bit if we can, because I think that's a very valuable piece of equipment. I know it's horribly expensive for what it is and trying to figure that out, but for those that aren't as aware of that, can you share a little bit about what you had originally proposed and what you'd like to try to do with that?
Yeah, so we sent 2 officers within our department to drone school, essentially. And they came up with a proposal for a drone program with our department. So essentially, it could be used not only by the police department, but it could be used by the fire department, it could be used for crash scenes, dam inspections, power pole inspections. It could really be a city-wide usage if we got, several different pilots trained. For the police department's use, it could be used for search and rescue type things on the river. If we need to be looking for somebody or something like that, we could use it for that. For the fire department, they have infrared thermal capabilities on that they could use it for as well. I can tell you, we've called upon Montgomery County and used theirs. That's our closest neighbor with a program. But yeah, that's kind of a citywide tool that could be used. We just proposed it, I think, last year in the budget.
It's a $25,000 expense, right? And that,
I think the proposal included 2.
2, yeah.
2 and some training. There was some
Training, yeah.
training and things like that.
Software.
Software, cameras. I think we beefed up one of the cameras to make it a better camera, so.
This might not be for now, but New River Community College has been making drones as part of a program that they have. They're printed, materials are all printed, everything but the motors, which come from Cole Morgan. And they've done a fantastic job on some of those drones, the big ones. But I wonder whether we might, in the future, maybe not now, I'm not trying to interfere with this proposal, but maybe in the future we could work a deal there that where it would be nice if we had a need and they have a need to have it funded to help them at the cost of making it. And it's a win-win situation, it's a good relation, good partnership between the community college and the city, and we end up with a really, I saw one of their drones that they had finished up there at the college, the big one, and it was all done with all printed materials.
I think this is a really important tool that we don't presently have. It is something we're able to borrow when we, desperately need it, but it's not something we've been able to program in regularly, and it's not something we have the money for right now. But if we have the ability to shift some equipment with ARP money or anything like that, maybe that might make sense, or if there's grant money where we could do a match or something, I don't know. I think there's value in that because I think it would work with multiple departments and give us a resource with that. The university, I work in the Artist College, and we have the UAV Center that's part of the university. They do additional training and work, and I know they've done some of the work for PD and some of the work for the schools. But that's something I wanted to bring up as something, it's a car basically, or a car-ish, not a full car anymore.
Yeah.
But, that's a piece of equipment that could potentially help us in a lot of ways that we haven't been able to figure out how to program in the budget yet.
So we've looked at a couple different grants, but a lot of the grants specifically say no vehicles, no weapons,
Yeah.
no drones. It's specific language in the grants.
You could do the training potentially, right, and maybe
Yeah.
software, but you couldn't get the actual
Couldn't do
drone?
the actual drone.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've looked at, every grant that comes out, we look for vehicles, we look for drones, and there's always the line in there that says, no drones, no dogs, no cars, no weapons. I don't know, but it's, we just got one for, we've tried to get creative. We got one for officer wellness, and we're like, hey, wonder if we can get a drone with that?
Yeah.
And it specifically has it in there, so.
Well, I think at some point, if we're able to figure it out with shifting some things this year, if that works, with the ARP stuff, if something happens, I know we've got a lot of needs with other things too, but I think this is a need that can potentially help us in a lot of ways. Perfect example, as we increase traffic on the river, should we have a crisis situation with someone, you can actually fly it, identify exactly where they are quicker, and deploy your boat, your team to that space more immediately. So there's value there. I know there's value within some of the other services that we have with our GIS. There could be some additional value there. So it's just something I wanted to mention because that's something Chief and I had talked about a little bit, and I'd hoped that maybe we'd find a way to do it, within the budget. But I also get that we can't do everything.
Our GIS department is also keeping an eye on that as well.
Yeah.
We have a private citizen who is
A grant possibility.
part of his name of his business, he says he's the drone realtor, drone architect. And he uses the drone a lot here. He's located right there on Arlington Avenue. And he uses the drone a lot to do his architecture work. I wonder whether, you might want to have his name on your list. I won't mention his name right now.
But anyway, I just wanted to bring it up because that's something I'd hoped we'd be able to fund because I think there's value in it.
Yeah, I mean, this year, we were looking at priorities, and for
Yeah.
us, cars were certainly the priority over a drone.
Right. What else is on your equipment priority that we haven't been able to fulfill at this point in time?
I think the cars do it, and then we got ballistic vests in the budget.
Yeah.
But I can't,
We did our cameras, so we've
Okay.
done that, and our dogs.
Munitions for training.
yeah, ammo costs went up. We're trying to do two days a year for that. We increased that line item. Training,
Yeah.
everything with training, lodging and cost to attend training seems to be going up, so we did put an increase in there for that. What am I missing?
How are we doing with the night vision? I know we were trying that out. Are we using that?
The night vision's great. I actually got an opportunity to come out and run around and play around a little bit Friday night, and was with an officer that was using it.
Right.
It's really good.
So we're seeing.
We didn't find the guy, but the camera works great.
Well, but there's an example too,
Camera
and I
works
know
great.
it's hard to fly at night with those things, but you can put heat sensors on drones and be able to determine where people are that you wouldn't even be able to see
Yeah,
with
the
night
handheld
vision.
unit we have would have the same capability
Yeah.
on the drone. Yeah.
Could I ask about the ballistic vests? Are they replacements, or did you need more?
So we're at our 5-year mark for replacement of the majority of our officers, and last 5 years, kind of the thought was, well, every 5 years, let's just replace all. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. I've only been here 2 years. My vest has got 3 more years to go. So what we're doing now is only replacing at this mark what we need to replace, which our department, 39 sworn, we're at about 28.
Yeah.
And then our SWAT vests for the SWAT team, there's a couple replacements on there as well.
Okay.
Kind of the same philosophy, turnout gear in all the fire department,
What do we do with the old gear?
canisters and things like that.
What do we do with the old gear?
The old vests.
Once we've replaced a vest?
I'm assuming just goes through some type of
Yeah,
destruction
once
process.
they have the
Yeah.
old vest come out, this is the first time we've had any come out.
Okay.
We'll do surplus on that.
Okay.
I guess they can do another rating somewhere else that might be able to be rated out.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they would be able to be used again just for liability purposes because they're expired.
Yeah, it's
So-
probably like a lot of our fire equipment, when it comes out, it probably would just be surplus to the shore.
Help me understand the expiration,
It's a 5-year ballistic vest.
even if it's not been, not been heavily impacted or anything along that
Yeah,
line?
5 years, the fibers and
Okay.
the makeup of the vest breaks down after
Okay.
5 years, so. We would never want to put our officers out there in an expired.
No,
vest.
I understand. I'm just trying to understand how that process works with that. Yeah. Okay. What other questions do you all have?
I'm just glad to see that we're,
Taking a bite of this, because as I'm sure you guys all are looking at these years of when things were supposed to be replaced. It's unfortunate, but we see what, kicking things down the road does. And so I'm glad that we're taking this seriously, just even for, future folks that are sitting in these seats. We're behind.
I've got a sensitive point on that because I got into some heavy arguments over kicking it down the road. I was against it
Well, I'm just glad that we're being very proactive, and especially in regards to our first responders.
years ago.
Any other things on equipment? All right, we spent a lot of time on this, but that's okay.
It's important.
I think this was important to go through, and if you will update this list with some of the stuff that's just, yeah, let's get some of that off of there and,
All the school stuff off, and we'll get everything that's not current. Actually, we had someone that was keeping that up. It looked like they stopped doing it maybe during COVID,
Yeah.
so we'll catch all that.
That would be helpful, and then to know what's coming, you know, maybe a line,
Something that's on like a concrete mixer.
yeah,
It may be a 1983 model.
but it still works.
Yeah.
No, and I don't,
Yeah.
Don't be
Yeah.
too-
I just want to know what, you know, when we're looking at, not to worry too much about out years, but I think that helps inform what we're doing now. You know, what are we looking at in next year's budget and the year after that in terms of that kind of replacement, and what would we have wiggle room on one way or the other? Again,
Rolling stock will certainly be the most expensive thing any department will be investing in.
yeah. Okay, thank you, Chief. Yep. Forrest, will you share with us basically the content of your email? Let's talk about NRVCS a little bit and
Yeah.
some of the challenges we're facing with that.
Yeah, I don't think need to take too much time on this, but it's just something I brought up when we met on Wednesday. Asked for follow-up from David, and he sent that, and so I've been doing some digging, because I brought this whole thing up during the council retreat in November. I know you weren't there, Dr. Hirschberger, but the rest of you will probably remember me bringing that up as something that was important to me as a representative of or on the board, wanting to see us do our share, our fair share, do our part. And I was able to get some more answers over the weekend and even today, so apologies for the lateness of that email, and you can review that when y'all have some time over the next few days. But essentially what it is we noticed when we talked in November that there was a sharp increase 2 or 3 years ago in what was requested from the NRVCS. The answer for that wasn't so much that there was a difference in services or a difference in demand. It's that we have been underpaying for years. And so this was them actually asking for the full amount that they should have been asking for those years. Is a significant jump, which is why we and the other localities haven't jumped up to that full. It's a 10% local match.
Right.
With the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. And it seems, as I understand it, that for a while that wasn't much concern, but then when it hit 3 or 4 years ago, with the new director, James, the VDBH, I'll call him, got onto them and said, you really need to be requesting the full amount. You really need to be pushing them. And the threat that they issue is that if the localities don't give the full amount, then we're not going to match it. Now, they haven't followed through on that threat to this point. There's a meeting each year when it comes short, and James brings letters from each of the localities explaining why there's a shortage. And to this point, there hasn't been an issue with it going through, but it's always an uncomfortable conversation, and it feels like something that could grow into an issue. Again, as I understand it, the biggest need right now is movement of good faith, so to speak, to show the VDBH that even if we can't get there right now, we're heading in that direction. And so that's what I would like to see. Right now, David, you've got approximately $56,000 budgeted. So that would be a 3.2% match. Again,
What page is that on in our budget? Do we have any idea?
it's in this,
Yeah, it's in that agency
agency
request,
funding
but I wanted to
report.
look at it in the budget itself where it's got several years' worth of stuff in there.
there are several years, in the agency as well, there's several years.
Page 26.
Okay.
That's in the budget book, and you've got the agency
Yeah.
summary.
A lot of things.
What I will
sounds like the
do
airport,
also is,
28 to 51.
I get the detail from the community services, it has like the client list, the breakdown of their expenses. Let me send you that tomorrow.
Yeah, that'll help. And I think the other thing is to know, the history of this, when this particular funding formula started, what was the behind-the-scenes piece with that? And,
We're trying to figure the history out. That's
Yeah.
something we don't know exactly.
Okay, yeah, so,
What Forrest said is pretty, sounds good and it's accurate. I don't know how far back Virginia Department of Behavioral, but I suspect it goes all the way back to, the case that happened, and his name has left me, but it was a, House of Representatives person that, had gotten injured from a, mental health issue. Remember that? And his name has left me, but
yeah, Credeeds.
but Credeeds. Then that's when a lot of this came into play. More emphasis was placed on community services boards. That influence has grown, and it's grown even more during the COVID times. And what happened back then is that, and that's what came in this jurisdictions you put this money in. Nobody really had the money at the time, and the state was able, through Department of Behavioral Services, continue to provide the health service funding that was necessary to keep the local CSBs going. Correct me if any of this is different.
yeah, I think that's right.
So that's where I think that occurred, and that's probably as much as 7 or 8 years ago, roughly. And then, since then, over the last 3 years is when they've been doing these letters to say, hey, due to unemployment, due to, and certainly the economy and,
COVID.
all the things that are associated have certainly been a burden on localities. They've continued to provide their funding source.
And they've probably gotten some federal money as well during this time. I'm sure that's probably been a big piece of it, yeah.
Of course, you see any of those details at your meetings or not, but I think that what Forrest is saying is right, that
Yeah.
it's going to probably come a day of.
Which is gonna come to
whenever
shove.
it is. I don't know if they'll call tomorrow and say, hey, we need Radford to come up with this 171 and all
Right.
the localities come up with theirs. We're doing what we've been recommended to us to do by CSB, and we've been
Right.
providing that backup and anything that they need for support services. And if we're able to, this summer, we think, we get to the end of the year, we see
Yeah.
we've got the ability, we may want to do the 3% or 4% or 5% or whatever and start working our way
What-
towards that, we do a special appropriation.
What percentage did you say we were of the request? It's 120 in the request?
So it's, it's a requested 10% match, we're at a 3.2%, or
Right.
3.3% match.
10%
Yeah,
is 171.
Yeah.
that's right, that's right.
And who's giving us the recommended amount?
The
It-
recommended amount comes from CSB. We
Well-
did recommended, and then
Oh.
they take that letter to, they take what we don't fund and say, hey, this locality can't spend this amount of money.
And you're saying you don't think that this is going on statewide, that you think this is unique to our area?
I don't know the answer
Okay.
to that. I can try to get that
That would
answer
be
from
good
James.
to know.
I'd be happy to ask James.
Because not that I absolutely want us to make sure we're doing what we need to. I also worry because I know all of these agencies typically ask us for well more than we're able to provide. So whether it's 50%, 10%, 20%, whatever we're able to do. So that's the piece that makes me a little nervous with this one part, that it's one piece of a great big puzzle, and if we increase that piece, how does that impact everything else?
If we increase it and we actually have a little bit of leeway, if there is some forgiveness and
Yeah.
other forms of income to
Yeah.
cover that, then, I mean, I think that's not necessarily a bad thing.
I
if
think
that's
this is a
the-
tough deal because I don't want to not be doing what we need to. I think we need to be stepping up to where we need to. But I think we also don't know, is it fairly standard that most communities are doing 3 or 4 or 5% or whatever that looks like? And if that's the case, how do we build that in to be where we need to be? Because what we don't want is that 1 year where they say, well, you're going to have to cut your budget because the locality's only provided 3%, we're only going to do, say, 6% match as opposed to the other, and so we don't get the, money.
To be reactionary, this is oddly enough, it's one of those unfunded mandates that they've been funding.
Yeah.
When it hasn't happened, so a lot
Well,
of
and
that
maybe this is,
falls back on you.
I'm trying to think of who we need to have around the table to have this discussion, because again, it's not just this one piece, because I think it wouldn't be impossible to figure out a potential path at some point for this. It's how does that impact everything else? And, because I know we're not funding all these things at the levels they request.
Did James know how they were doing the General Assembly? I mean, nobody knows what's going on.
I wasn't able to talk with James, I talked with his assistant, but I can follow up with him this week and,
I think knowing that, and then if we need someone to talk with us, and I don't know if this would be a VML thing, because knowing what other localities are doing with this, knowing what other agencies are doing, I think that's important, because this feels like a very big thing. And one that could be bigger than any of us imagine, because I know we get significant agency requests, and we give everybody a little something. It's just not always,
And I do think
you know, what
if
they're
we're
asking.
looking at it as a non-funded mandate that still gets funded, then I think there's something to say about that too, as long as it's being funded, unless.
I think there's something to say on both sides, though.
It is.
Because it
Well,
is still being funded, but it's
at
a
some
sort
point
of
it could stop.
precarious
And I would
situation.
say,
It is.
like, the moment that mandate is no longer funded, then I think, then we have to prioritize it even more in the budget. But if it's a non-funded mandate that's being funded, then I say, then I'm okay with them funding it.
Well, and that,
It's not-
what we don't know is this the way the state has chosen to fund it, to try to put some pressure on localities to give as much as they can for the services that are provided, and then they backfill regardless, but, I don't know. I don't know that answer.
And I guess I'd like to see, like, is there, I know that in theory, at any moment, they can take away
Yank it.
that
But that could
funding.
happen in a million different ways.
Right.
The state budget is like that. There's
Right.
1,000 things they could change at any time.
But
But
we
I
still-
don't disagree. So Forrest, what were you thinking ultimately would start moving us in that direction? Trying to get us up to the 4 or 5% level? or-
Well, David, currently there is a formula in place that there is a small increase every year, right?
Yeah, it's been about 10%.
Right, so-
We've been meeting the original amount plus 10% each year.
So that percent is based on the previous year's, right,
Correct.
right.
And the
So
total amount
I-
from
I guess my only thought there, and I could be totally wrong on this, but my only thought there is that seems odd to me to have the percentage based on the previous year when the total percentage is based on something else.
I don't know, yeah, you're right, I don't know why that is, but I was just looking at.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the wrong paper, but it does seem to be based on, I don't know if that's because that is the client base they know, and that's why, I don't know.
Yeah. So to answer your question, David, at least as for getting on track to someday reach 10%, I would like us to see, based on the percentage of what's requested, us to go up 1% or even 0.5% every year, so that we're at least committing to getting there eventually. And as
So in
for
this year's
this
budget,
year,
it'd be adding like 12,000?
essentially, to get to
dollars.
4%, yeah. And then,
Where would we take $12,000?
yeah,
I guess is the question.
I don't know that,
And
and,
so here's my question,
I would do
though.
a special appropriation somewhere before the new fiscal year.
So, and of course, I'm supportive of the agency, so I'm not, this is
No,
not saying
I
I'm
know.
supportive.
I know.
I'm just saying, if right now, the trend is they're willing to pay for this out of a larger kitty and allows us to do more within our community, in a community with what's the average income, 33,000 per household? Like, I think if, that's like, we're paying ahead on something that they may go ahead and pay, and that's built into their budget, understanding that it may not be one day, but if it currently is, then I'd like to keep our local funds
Let's
continuing to work on other things if at all possible.
talk to James and see what kind of feedback he's getting to really understand where we are with this. Maybe, I think that would help us all
So,
know, like, how imminent this is.
I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay.
So I can ask him specifically about about other localities, what they're looking like right now, what they're doing, not just our little area right here, but across the state. I can ask him about anything new on the General Assembly front line. Is there anything else specifically that any of you would like me to ask him about?
Well, one of the things is, I think, one of the ways they've funded themselves is with overhead from the various projects they have. And that's precarious. For example, they had our transit contract, didn't they? And how much did they lose by not getting it? how much overhead were they losing? How much is in there for administration of that?
I don't know their breakdown, because they shared.
But it's quite a bit of money is all I'm trying to say.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
They're gonna look at the facility, they're gonna have to fully pay for a facility and all the costs associated with it.
Yeah.
But they kind of went into the bidding process, I think, knowing that that was a possibility.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm
going
just
from
saying,
there. Yeah.
they don't have a pot of money
No.
that they're using to fund this, isn't that right,
Right.
Forrest?
Yeah, and that's
They're
something,
they're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
In a lot of ways.
yeah, on that line, that's something I would like to ask James. So what you're saying is they're getting that state government money, but I also do want to follow up and see how much are they missing the local money?
Right.
So that's
Well,
another thing I
and
can
just to
ask for
have a
sure.
better understanding of, what the pressure is on the localities to know where we need to be. I mean, I'm sure the state is going to say we could use this money elsewhere, just like we're saying the same thing. There's a million fires to put out, so trying to figure that out. But I think having a better understanding, and also, that's kind of where I was saying, I really think we need to have a fairly substantial work session later. It won't work in time for this budget, but later, to talk about all of these things and really this pool, because it's not just that, it's DSS, it's really all of these health centers, everybody has been affected, the jail, the detention home, all of these things have these needs that are presently unmet. And Forrest, I certainly appreciate you working on this with community services. I think this is a huge challenge because, again, we get into what's sustainable and what we can manage. Because again, right now, if we had to find $12 or $15 or $20,000, I mean, there goes one of Chief's police cars, or something else goes down the way to be able to make this balance. Because that is the one piece I would be uncomfortable with, and this is back to our very first discussion. The other option is we don't put as much away for our reserves. But that has an impact, too, that I don't think any of us are comfortable with. So, again, trying to think strategically, we need to have those discussions and not be surprised, because I completely agree with where you're coming from. It would be horrible one day for them to say, okay, they're going to have to cut this, and this is what this means, and we got to come up with 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever that looks like. Yeah. But I do think, too, this is something maybe I'll bring up at Regional Commission as a line item once you get some more information, because this is not just a Radford issue to discuss.
Yeah.
And whatever we do, we probably need to act maybe in lockstep as a region with the communities that are served. So I think that has value, because that makes more sense.
If you'd like, I can also reach out to the board members that represent Montgomery, Pulaski,
great.
Floyd, and Giles to see how their their boards are handling this.
Well, and I think,
For Montgomery County, their full amount would be 600.
Yeah, it's a lot for Montgomery, yeah.
For Pulaski, it's 402.
Yeah.
So it's a lot.
it is a lot.
There, and I like what you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. I think to ask the question, how much are they missing Radford's money?
Yeah.
Right.
Is a good way to pose
Yeah.
that.
Because I do think there's a part of me that loves, I mean, it's the altruistic thing to do.
Yeah.
Because we all really support their services, but I also don't want to be kicking more in a kitty inadvertently when the money is laying in another kitty statewide that they already have been budgeting to do this, and then that just leaves us with less.
Well,
So
and
I guess I want to know if what they're saying is, okay, they're not going to give us this amount and we are falling this short, or if they're saying, if you'd give it from us, it makes it a little bit easier and we don't have to get it from them. I don't know.
Well, but it's a match, so it's not like, yeah, so anything that we give, it's not like that doesn't come from the other side. Does that make sense? So, but
well, it's an
I
expectation.
do see your
Part of the
point,
reason
but-
they do that is to make sure the local governments are chipping in, which I get.
Yeah, and
But at the same time, we get into a lot of this stuff with the state where basically the politicians at the state level don't want to either raise taxes or shift money away from a priority or something like that. So they say, let's make the local government do it. And you guys figure it out. And this isn't one of those right now.
That's
So
right.
that's your
Okay.
point.
That's what I'm
But
saying.
I do think, though,
Might create another financial crisis on
It's,
the cusp of everything else
yeah,
that we've been going
but I
through.
do think it's worth having an in-depth discussion to understand fully all of these things and where some of these things are. If, just like we talked about with the equipment, us knowing what's here and what we've got to do, rather than just say, well, let's not worry about it if we're okay for now, because we might not be okay in a year, or in 2 years,
Yeah.
or in 4
We're-
years.
we're
And-
giving
Although
them-
I think looking at equipment that's aging is gonna be a lot easier than trying to predict what the state
Totally.
legislators
But
are
I
gonna
think
do.
too, I think too, having that regional discussion, and also knowing if we're the only region doing this, or if this has been the practice, and maybe even bringing in our senator and delegate to talk a little bit about this process, and maybe asking them, let's change this thing. If everybody's given about 3 to 5%, let's change that formula and, go that direction. I mean, if in practicality what's happening,
Yeah.
sometimes those are the things that happen. But
I sent you something.
I very much appreciate this discussion. It's super scary when we start talking about some of these things, because the need is so great and only growing every day. I mean, with Jesse's meetings, with Dick's meetings, I know those needs are so tremendously high that it feels a little overwhelming at times, because that's an awful lot of money to try to find. And we're thrilled if we get an extra 100,000 on our meals tax, or an extra 50,000 out of sales tax. So, those things get sucked up real quick.
And the other thing is, they requested a 5% increase. We went from 51,000 to 56,000, I guess, somewhere around there. But that doesn't begin to answer the need, I know, but we are answering the request. We're poised to do that, aren't we, I think?
But I think so one of the things, and I don't want to belabor this tonight, and I've mentioned this, I sent you all some stuff about it, and of course the pandemic hit and it kept us from being able to do it. One of the things I think that can help us with our budgeting and all that is to have an additional piece to this that are the outcomes we're trying to achieve and how we're meeting that with our budget expenditures. That's a concept some communities are going toward. It's an outcomes-based budget. And so you talk to each department, you talk to each agency and all that, and basically as part of their budget request, they address initiatives and outcomes that are the priorities of the community. And this is something I think, I haven't really pushed it during COVID because I felt like we've just had too much going on. But moving forward beyond this, it might make sense for us to look at this to where we're really tying any expenditure to a particular type of outcome, and we're evaluating it that way. Now, almost everything we've got in here, I would say people are like, somebody's going to like it, somebody's not going to like it, there's going to be things up and down. But I think communities are doing that and reevaluating what they do from time to time based on what those outcomes are. I think it's kind of hard when we look at, what is it now, 4,500 lines of budget and, a 100-page document, to be able to try to tweak here and there to try to understand. I think we've done a little bit of that tonight to get through that. But that's something that I want to challenge us and whomever are sitting in these seats next year and the staff a little bit to begin to think about that, because I think tying that together would help us in our discussions. And so this summer, I think if we're able to have this meeting, this work group meeting on all of these social services type things, and talk about the outcomes we're looking for in the community and the things that we're investing in, and where we might need to put more money or where we might need to reevaluate and things along that line, there's value there. But yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the community services has indicated they project to serve 1,419 Radford. That's an outcome. That's a,
Right.
And they figure that cost will be $39.46 per person. But we don't know what that really buys.
Right.
What is the service that we're getting? They're mixed, there's all kinds. So they're all mixed together there, 1,419, of all different kinds of services. But I'd
And
love
where
to
we
see a
value,
breakdown.
where we invest. I mean, it's the same thing with community action. It's the same thing with social services. It's the same thing with all of these. To have a better understanding of what needs are being met, what needs are not being met, and what those priorities and outcomes are for us. But I think it also goes a step further, because ultimately, I think when you go through a process like that, you find some things that maybe you don't want to do because it's not meeting your current needs, your current priorities, but things you want to do. And many times that requires revenue, that requires buy-in from your citizens, that requires participation. That helps tell that story and make that case.
Yeah.
And one of the things I struggle with, one of the things with equipment, I get asked about equipment when we purchase stuff probably more than anything else. People are like, why are we buying, 6 police cars? Or why are we doing this? So it's very important that we have those answers and that we've sort of vetted that to that extent to give our citizens those answers as best we can and to talk about it just like when we did with our retreat. Why are these priorities for us and what are we trying to achieve as a community? That type of targeted investment will get us further down the line. And I think it helps all of us when we're faced with talking with someone to say, well, this is why I agreed to that, and this is why this is a good idea, or to really move the needle. I mean, ultimately, when we look at some of these things, if we were to have to fund these things at a higher level, that's going to become essentially important because we may have to find $100,000, $200,000. There's a penny on your real estate tax or, an increase on your sales tax or whatever that looks like, or we're not doing something else. And that's got to be a justification we've got to have. So,
We're talking inflation perhaps.
sure.
But then.
Now, inflation helps us too because
then
it's going to
the
inflate
revenues
other
go up.
things.
Revenues go up under inflation.
But that's a dangerous
Do they
spiral
go
to get in.
enough to meet
all a
the
spiral.
inflation on these?
So, having said that, one of the things I'm hoping to be thinking about for the future is to tie these things in so that, and I don't know if Munis is even able to do this, but to tie these things in so when we expend something, this is generally the outcome that it's resulted. And I think that helps us. It may be broader. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I have some white papers. I think I sent you all one a year and a half ago, but I think it's something for us to revisit as a concept because, again, we're talking about some big deals. We're trying to shift our economy. We're trying to make sure we pay for stuff that we've moved down the road significantly. We've got a lot of things going on, and if it's all tied into outcomes, if positions are tied to outcomes, if priorities are tied to outcomes, then that helps us all the way. What else do we have in this budget that we need to bring up tonight?
Nothing.
It's a little easier because there's no tax or fee increases.
Yeah.
I do think realistically folks are going to have to understand future. There are some things, or water, wastewater, we're going to need to look at significantly. And one of the things we've moved toward for the last couple of years, but definitely this year, the electric piece is coming faster than we can imagine. And that is changing dramatically, where that has been a net profit center for us to be able to fund an awful lot of things. And we're going to be very fortunate. We don't know what a new contract's going to look like, but ultimately that's going to shift how we use that money and shift some things around. So it's good. We're weaning ourselves off of that.
So timing-wise, the contract that we have coming to an end is perfect timing.
It is.
Which is rare, because it's not like you got 10 more years.
Right.
Because this contract, you can look at your green energy.
Yep.
You can look at variable energy. You can look at a number of different things that we need to do, sales, things like that. So,
Well, and I think, too, it's going to provide us the opportunity. One of the biggest things I hear about with electricity is folks who want to do solar and then be able to sell it back in the system. We didn't program that in the contract last time. There's a cost for doing that. And I think, again, that's kind of what we have to discuss. Are we okay with maybe what ends up being a higher electric rate, but people can put solar on their homes and add more to the system? How does that impact us? And, go from there. So there's a whole lot. But having said that, for this year, we're balanced. There's nothing really out of whack on anything. We haven't talked at a really high level about all the ARP money. That's going to help us in a lot of ways. It's going to give us some of our capital priorities that will help long-term investments, so that's a very good thing. Do you all have anything else that you want to talk about related to the budget tonight that we either have a question about or concern? Okay.
Well, I don't want to belabor things any longer. 2 hours is not too bad for this. You feel all right? I think we'd be.
Feeling very different if we had a 5-cent tax increase, We'd probably be sweating it out a little bit. Let's make a commitment now, and Jenny, if you'll help me remember this, probably, do you think it would be good to have that meeting before we get to the end of the budget year, to talk about these social services and things? Or, okay. So maybe July, August, we can program in a work session, and if you can get some more information, we can try to bring some people around the table. I think it's gonna be a pretty big table, because there's a lot of people involved, but I think it's worth it to have that discussion and go from there.
I actually was thinking, if you were talking about it at the commission, it might be that we want to do a regional Zoom.
Yeah.
Because they may have the same kind of questions.
I'm sure they will,
And just pull the main ones you all have.
Yeah.
The larger ones, because
yeah.
all the way the commissions are, the agencies are about $600,000 of your budget.
Yeah. So I think that's worth it, to talk about and figure out where we are and what we're going to do. If you'll talk to James, so we can still make some alterations if we need to in the next week, but Monday night, we pretty much need to be where we're going to be.
And what I would recommend is, if it's not something substantial, we go forward with the budget and then come back and do an appropriation anytime between now and August, depending on whether you want to keep it in this year, assuming it's going to be a
Right.
year, I'd wait till July 1 and we just do an appropriation for the additional $12,000.
Okay.
If that's what we decide, you want to do to start.
Well, let's see what information we can get. Let's see what happens during our public hearing portion on Monday night and talk about that. Let's have a little more discussion then, but let's revisit this when we have time to really delve into it, because this is a pretty big one, and go from there. Is there anything else in the budget that we need to, I know we're going to get some answers on the schools, but that's more just for our information. I mean, we're not giving them any more money on the textbook fund anyway, it's just how they're funding it.
Our amount is fixed rate, $6 million.
No, I only asked out of.
We're just trying to understand. Yeah.
I'll send that to the school superintendent tomorrow, and then Calista and I'll send you the Muir Lake Community Services
Okay.
funding support.
Is there anything else you all can think of?
David, thank you. This is, been very well done. I mean, we're very fortunate this year in a lot of ways. There's been some
Challenges, there's still challenges, we're very fortunate. Calista, thank you. I know you all have put in a lot of long hours on this. And, Dawn and Melissa and Chief and Jenny and everybody, thank you all very much. I know the department heads have worked on this for a while, and we've done pretty well to get where we are. I don't think we have anything else tonight. Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.